How to write the introduction. Chapter 1. Introduction. The introduction is the first chapter of your thesis or dissertation and appears right after the table of contents. It's essential to draw the reader in with a strong beginning. Set the stage for your research with a clear focus, purpose and direction. The introduction should include 1. Topic and context. What does the reader need to know to understand the dissertation? 2. Focus and scope. What specific aspect of the topic will you address? 3. Relevance and importance. How does the research fit into existing work on this topic? 4. Questions and objectives. What does the research aim to find out and how? 5. Overview of the structure. What does each chapter of the dissertation contribute to the overall aim? Starting your introduction. Although the introduction comes at the beginning of your dissertation, it doesn't have to be the first thing you write. In fact, it's often the very last part to be completed, along with the abstract. It's a good idea to write a rough draft of your introduction near the beginning of the research to help guide you. If you wrote a research proposal, you can use this as a template, as it contains many of the same elements. But you should revise your introduction throughout the writing process, making sure it matches the content of your chapters. For an effective introduction, make sure to include all of the following elements. Topic and context. Begin by introducing your topic and giving any necessary background information. It's important to contextualize your research and generate interest. It's aimed to show why the topic is timely or important, for example, by mentioning a relevant news item, academic debate, or practical problem. Example topic: young people's attitudes to changes in climate. Example context: recent news stories about the children's climate strike, and the increasing importance of youth engagement with climate politics. Focus and scope. After a brief introduction to your general area of interest, narrow your focus and define the scope of your research. For example, what geographical area are you investigating? What time period does your research cover? What demographics or communities are you researching? What specific themes or aspects of the topic does your dissertation address? Example of focus and scope: British teenagers' engagement with current UK climate policy. Relevance and importance. It's essential to show your motivation for doing this research, how it relates to existing work on the topic, and what new insights it will contribute. Give a brief overview of the current state of research, citing the most relevant literature and indicating how your research will address a problem or gap in the field. You will conduct a more in-depth survey of relevant sources in the literature review section or chapter. Depending on your field, the importance of your research might focus on its practical application, for example, in policy or management, or on advancing scholarly understanding of the topic, for example, by developing theories or adding new empirical data. In many cases it will do both. Explain how your dissertation can determine the following points. Helps solve a practical or theoretical problem, addresses a gap in the literature, builds on existing research, proposes a new understanding of the topic. Example: relevance and importance. Young people will determine the future of climate policy, so it is essential to gain an in-depth understanding of their engagement with this issue. While there has been much research on youth attitudes to climate change in general, Corner et al. 2015, Holmberg and Alvinius 2019, Lee et al. 2020, none has focused specifically on how teenagers understand and respond to current UK climate policy. The increasing prominence of youth climate activism, both in the UK and across the world, suggests that teenagers are highly aware of the issues at stake. However, it is unclear to what extent they directly engage with government policies in this area. To fully understand the current state of climate politics, it is important to gain a more complete picture of young people's knowledge and perceptions of UK climate policy. Research questions and objectives. This is perhaps the most important part of your introduction. It sets up the expectations of the rest of your dissertation. How you formulate your research questions and objectives will depend on your discipline, topic and focus, but you should always clearly state the central aim of your research. You can briefly mention the research methods you used to answer your questions, but if you are including a separate methodology chapter, don't go into too much detail here. If your research aims to test hypotheses, you can formulate them here, along with a conceptual framework that posits relationships between variables. Sometimes the hypotheses will come later in the dissertation, after your literature review. Example of research question: how do British high school students engage with the UK government's policies on climate change? Example of objectives: to conduct surveys to collect data on students' levels of knowledge, understanding, and positive or negative perceptions of government policy. To determine whether attitudes to climate policy are associated with variables such as age, gender, region, and social class. To conduct interviews to gain qualitative insights into students' perspectives and actions in relation to climate policy. Overview of structure: to help guide your reader through the dissertation, end with an overview of its structure, summarizing each chapter to clearly show how it contributes to your central aims. It is best to keep the overview concise. 1 or 2 sentences should usually be enough to describe the content of each chapter. If your research is more complicated or does not follow a conventional structure, you might need up to a paragraph for each chapter. For example, a humanities dissertation might develop an argument thematically rather than dividing the research into methods, results and discussion. If your structure is unconventional, make it clear how everything fits together. Headings of Chapter 1: Introduction, Background of study, Problem statement, Research questions, Research objectives, Importance of study, Operational definitions, Structure of study. Kindly subscribe my YouTube channel Thesis Helper. Thanks for watching.